Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. Okay, everybody, I want you to get your paper and your pencil out because this is going to be worth listening to, and we're going to have a great time talking to you about a bunch of stuff, because the gentleman that we have with us, he's a PhD, he's a therapist, he's a coach, he's an author. He's got a great book out that is called Rudeness Rehab, Reclaiming Civility in the Workplace and Your Home Space, which has won a bunch of awards and has done very, very well. His name is John O'Brien. And if you want to go to, now there are two websites that we can reference. One is rudenessrehab.com, and the other one is your regular website, which is
activatesuccess.org. That's my coaching and consultation website, Kevin.
Yes, it is. And you're busy with all of that and so much more.
Indeed. Yes. Thank you for having me on the show, by the way.
Oh, you're more than welcome. It's my honor to have you here because you are exactly the type of individual. You're friendly, and by the way, you've got a great mustache. And
you like that? That was my COVID project, Kevin. Other people were curing cancer and doing things. I was creating the perfect handlebar mustache. That's my contribution to humanity.
I got to ask you, because occasionally I'll get this. Somebody will stop me in a grocery store or something and say, "Man, you've got a great mustache." And my answer to them is, "Yeah, my mustache is older than you."
That's great.
Because if my mustache is almost 50 years old.
Okay.
So there. But in any event, we expect Rochelle to show up sooner or later, and she's read your book, and she's less rude than she was, which is a really good thing. Again, she's a darling young girl. And but I wanted to ask you, what motivated you to write the book in the first place?
Well, I have I sometimes say, I've been an expert in how to be rude all my life, but when I first entered the Master's in Counseling Psychology program at Tufts University, I developed this awareness of the importance of skills that people need to regulate themselves. I was working more primarily with kids and adolescents, but then when I got into my PhD, or as I like to say, piled higher and deeper program at Michigan State, I was developing, helping people develop skills to manage their reactions to things like trauma and addiction. And that's been my work in therapy with people for over 30 years. But about 5 years ago, I heard Christine Porath speak and about the problem of rudeness in our society. It was like a light bulb went off for me. But I do have a few things I'm doing. I have this busy life. So I kind of thought at some point I want to write a book and about this topic. And then the pandemic hit. And I thought that would be a time we would all come together, Kevin. But in fact, it was a time that we became further divided. And I saw how frontline staff were being treated and how especially healthcare workers who were trying to help us were being treated. And then when the pandemic started to wane, I sort of thought, well, maybe this pandemic of rudeness will reduce, but it didn't. It just seems to continue to escalate. So that really prompted me to write the book, because I wanted people to feel empowered about how to deal with this pandemic of rudeness in our society.
Why do you think it is? Where did it come from? I remember a time in my young life that I live in Seattle, and there was a time when everybody was very nice to one another. They said hello as you pass them on the street, and they talk to you and stuff. And something changed. What was it? Why did it change?
Well, I think there's lots of different reasons. I can't remember the name of the book, so I can't exactly reference it, but basically it looked at the idea of how our society became more divided when we stopped participating in bowling leagues. That bowling leagues, seriously, bowling leagues were like this unifier of people, and it was a community. And our culture has gotten away from that, and from this sense of community. Participation in organized religion has gone down. Where I am in Maine has some of the lowest rates in the nation. Um, so I think that there's been this increasing disconnection in our society that's been also then fueled by um, social media and politics. And then you add in the enforced isolation, which had its purpose in the pandemic, that we were all in our foxholes. And I think that just really lit the fire of rudeness.
And by the way, for those of you who may not know, bowling is a sport that you there's a lane that you go down, and there are 10 pins at the end. And a bowling league is where teams get together, and people get together, they form a team, and then they play other teams while they're bowling, which is a great sport. And you know, you're right. We don't do the same things as we used to. Um, one of the things that I've never understood is that, yeah, and I'm a Seattle Seahawk fan. Now you're in Maine, so you don't have a team in Maine, but who's your favorite team in football?
Well, I have to go, unfortunately, with the New England Patriots. I'm a Pats fan through and
Wow,
through. They're
that's
not doing so well now, but hey, we are always Pats fans no matter what. Good times
I,
and bad.
and I'm a Mariners fan too, and we only have bad and worse. Like, we've never been to the World Series or anything. But I was looking at, you get 60,000 people, 65,000 people in a football stadium,
Mhm.
and they're all like in Foxborough. They're all there because they want to watch the Patriots beat up on somebody, and they all get together, and they're excited, and they have a couple of beers and maybe some popcorn and a hot dog, and then their team does something good. Strangers will get up and high five each other, and people will hug, and they'll have a great time because there's a common purpose amongst all of them. And
Yes.
then, of course, the game's over, whether they win or lose. If they win, they're happier. If they lose, they're not. But then they go out into the parking lot, and then they return to being the way that they were, and being rude and not letting people in and doing all of the things. It just amazes me how we can change on a dime so quickly, from being yay yay, we're all together in this, and then we're not suddenly.
Well, I think of the other example growing up was my family was Irish Catholic, so we would go to church. And the joke was always you'd be this really spiritual person in church, and then people would go out into the parking lot. And it was like, Christian, start your engines. I mean, it was like roller derby. Who was going to be able to push who out of the parking lot? That was Massachusetts, and we drive, the contact sport down there. But people can, yes, just become very different. It changes on a dime in a different context.
I had a guy that it was a friend of mine, and I asked him one time, because he would say a prayer at when before every meal, and I said, "Do you go to church?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, why do you pray before every meal?" And he says, "I'm just covering as many bases as I can."
Wise man.
And but you're right, because and there are some people that go to church, and I've actually heard people say, "I'm going to church to confess the way that I've been the rest of the week."
Right. Right.
And I don't
Yeah.
know why that people don't do that, and why is it? It's like when I go to the grocery store, and the cashier is, they've been on their feet for hours, and the person ahead of them doesn't say hello, doesn't look at them. They treat them as less than, or a waiter in the restaurant, or a fast food server, or any of those things, and they treat them as less than. So I feel like it's my obligation to say how you doing and smile and I hope your day's going okay. And then wasn't that guy a jerk? And but we're not all that way and kind of stuff. But what is it? You're a PhD, and I'm hoping you can help me with
Oh,
this.
me, yeah.
Um, what is the motivation for people? Does it make people feel good when they're rude to other people?
Well, I think this is, well, there's many different motivations. I'm going to give you the psychologist answer that is befitting of a PhD, which is it depends, Kevin. How's that? But sometimes people are rude because they're in a bad mood. And if I'm in a bad mood, I want to spread that bad mood to others. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. It's just I'm in a bad mood. I'm out in the world, and so you get a taste of my bad mood. That's sometimes it. Sometimes people forget what it's like to be working in service industries, and that's where I started work when I was 14 in a service industry in a restaurant, and worked at that restaurant for 12 years. But I never forgot. Even as I got my undergraduate degree, I had my master's degree, and it didn't matter since I was in a small town working in a restaurant. People assumed that I was uneducated. And so they would treat me as such. And I've never forgotten that. And when I was a waiter, the way people would treat me and how dismissive, not all, but it only takes a few. And that really just brings into your mind that that's not the person I'm going to be. I'm going to, so I think some people forget what the experience of being a waiter or waitstaff is like. And some people feel as if they're no longer equals. I've made it, and so I get to tell you what to do, or you work for me. And there's a less than belief system that's based in that. And I guess the other thing I would say is that sometimes people are just not so necessarily in a bad mood, but they're just stressed and they're not aware of how they're coming across.
And I wanted to touch bases with you because of the other work that you do, and which is that you work with companies, you work with organizations to create low stress workplaces that will ignite employee engagement, increase productivity, and strengthen profitability.
Yes.
We need to take a break in just a second. Let's see if somebody is and Gowdy has got something to contribute. Some people will hold the door open for you at the store, then get out of their car and go cut people off. And Gowdy is a professional truck driver, like I was a professional bus driver. And we know, and the people are. I don't know why, and maybe you can help me what the motivation is for somebody to try and cut off an 18-wheeler. Do they not understand that an 18-wheeler cannot stop at a dime, and they're liable to end up getting into trouble, and then they get mad at the driver and stuff like that. But we'll talk about that more in the second half. But I really want to get into how you help companies and businesses activate success, because when you do that work that you do, you don't just affect one individual, you affect the entire company, and you can actually change the company culture. Have you found that to be true?
Absolutely. Obviously, it depends upon the role that I am brought in for. And if I'm coaching someone in middle management, then they may not be able to have as much of an impact on the company as a whole. But many times I will work with leaders and make the point that it's the leader sets the standard. And if you're saying this is a place of respect and support, but you're not exhibiting that yourself, well, then that's lip service. Or if you're saying that's important and you're exhibiting that, but you are allowing other people in leadership or these kind of individual contributors that seem to contribute a great deal, you allow them to get away with rude or bad behavior, well, then that's not following through with what you say. So it's important that the leaders in the organization are consistent with a mission of making it a more civil workplace and supporting people in speaking their mind in respectful ways.
When we come back from this break, I've got a quick story I want to tell you to see if I got it right. And it
Okay.
seems like I did when I was in the restaurant business. I was a general manager of a really, really busy restaurant. It was
Hmm.
a Mexican restaurant, and I don't know why I'm, anyway. We need to take this quick break, and then we'll be right back. And we're talking with John O'Brien. Go to either of his websites, which is activatesuccess.org, or the other one is,
Rudenessrehab.com.
and we'll be right back. Stay right where we are. At 67 years young, I never thought I'd feel this good again. But thanks to Purium's Ultimate Transformation Lifestyle, to date, I've lost 37 pounds and gained energy, confidence, and a whole new outlook on life. This isn't a diet. Purium is a complete lifestyle change, giving me all the natural, organic, nutrition-packed superfoods that fuel my body, crush my cravings, and help me burn fat naturally without starving myself. No gimmicks, no guesswork, just a simple, proven system that works. Superfood shakes, detox support, and real results. If I can do this at 67, imagine what you can do. It's your time to feel better, look better, and live better with Purium. Let's do it now, and let's do it together. Go to www.positivetalkradio.net and click on the Transform You to get started. That's positivetalkradio.net. Transform You. And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. And John O'Brien is right over there. John, I got to tell you, I learned early on that when you are the boss, and to set the stage for you, on a Friday night or a Saturday night in the restaurant, we had 13 servers, 3 bartenders, 4 cocktail waitresses, 3 hosts, 4 bus people, a whole kitchen staff of like 11 or 12. And so there were tons of people, and
Mm-hmm.
they were all looking to someone to lead them. And so on like a Friday night or a Saturday night before we would begin, I would walk up to the staff individually and groups of them that were waiting to get started. And I did the exact thing. Hey, we're gonna be busy. Get ready. We're gonna be busy. We're gonna give the best service in the world tonight, and the food's gonna be awesome. We're gonna be busy. Get ready. And they thought I was crazy. But it motivated them in a positive way to that I was going to lead them and to help them get through the night and make it work. Did I do the right thing?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was, I mean, again, using humor to kind of, lighten the mood, but also just reminding them that we got to up our game. We got to be ready because it's going to be busy. And I think the more that leaders can be supportive of their workers and talk about what they, how they can support them, but also what they would like for them to do, what behaviors they'd like to see. That's, I think, what a great leader can do.
And it's more fun that way.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And by the way, if you're a leader of a business and you're listening to this, I want to, and I'm going to ask John this because I've never seen it, not once, but and I'm sure you've looked at a lot of P&Ls over your time, which is a profit and loss statement, and there isn't a line anywhere that I've ever found that says the cost of turnover.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And the cost of turnover is huge when you are looking at running a business, because people, if you're constantly having to retrain people, they never get really good at what they're doing. And then the productivity isn't as high. And it costs you, what is it, like to replace a really good employee and somebody who's really good at their job, it takes like as much as 18 months to train somebody?
Yes, I don't remember the statistics exactly, but it is something like that. And there's the cost of the loss of institutional knowledge for the people that are leaving. That's kind of it's sometimes hard to identify. And then there's the costs of training someone new to get them up to speed, and how the team then is not able to be as productive because they're down a member, or, sometimes teams can be losing several people at a time, and the team is because of the leader. And many organizations just continue in this vicious cycle of losing people until at some point they go, wait a minute, this person left and this person left and these 5 people left and they're all on Ted's team. I wonder if there's something going on here, right? So there's all those costs of turnover that people fail to recognize. And if you're curious, that there's also the potential, depending upon the size of the business, it can also fester into the demise of the business. And if you'd like, I have a story to go along with that.
I would love for you to tell me a story.
Okay. Just didn't want to launch into it. But this goes back several years. I went with a friend for dinner on a Friday night and went to this new restaurant that had recently opened, and got to the restaurant, and we were talking to someone while we were waiting in line ordering, and it turned out it was the owner. And she was funny, friendly, had a great sense of humor, had this infectious laugh, and she was really excited that she had opened this business. And so we wished her well and ordered our meals, and I grabbed my exciting beverage for Friday night of a water out of the cooler. And then we headed on out to the far side of the patio where we sat down. And we were seated for maybe 90 seconds, Kevin. And all of a sudden, I was aware someone was screaming on the patio. And I turned to look, and I realized it was the owner who was screaming. And she was pointing. And she was coming at me. And she screamed, "I don't know who you think you are, but where I come from, taking something you haven't paid for is stealing, and I won't have it in my business." What had happened is her employee had not rung up the water from the cooler that I'd ordered a water, but it hadn't been rung up. I didn't know. I just paid whatever. And so anyway, of course, I'd like to tell you, since I'm a mindfulness guy and a mindfulness practitioner, that I responded like Deepak Chopra would, with complete and utter calm. But that wouldn't be true.
Bet not.
No, so I leaped up from my chair, told her it was not my responsibility to supervise her staff, and I didn't like the way she was talking to me. And I went in and I paid the $1.50 for the water. And then I did, where I'm a frugal New Englander, so I stayed and had my meal. But then, when we left, I thought, I am never going back to that restaurant. And lots of people witnessed that interaction. And that restaurant closed a few months later, because my sense is the behavior she exhibited with me was not just me, but other people too. So, it can be, the level at which incivility impacts a business can vary from impacting, employees' well-being or productivity, all the way down to the business having to close.
Well, and you only have one time to make a first impression.
Absolutely. Right.
And that goes for a manager as well. With a new employee, or if you're a new manager that comes in, you only have that one chance. And
Yes.
if you don't make a good impression, then, without lying, of course, because I've had managers that would say something, and then I would go back, 3 months later and go, "Didn't you say this?"
Mm-hmm.
And they were not doing that.
Yeah.
And so that can create a whole new negative thing for everybody.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But let's also face it, that working with the public is not easy.
No.
And people sometimes, if you're in the restaurant business, if you're on the frontline staff, healthcare, you have to deal a lot of times with unhappy people coming in, and that is not easy. So, that is where it's hard to maintain your cool while you're dealing, or like you said, with that cashier who was treated poorly by the person in front of you. Sometimes a really toxic or difficult interaction can then set off the cashier or the worker, and then they are in a bad mood, and then they spread that with future customers.
Can I tell you a real quick story about that? I was in this Mexican restaurant again, and one of the things that we do is we give people a basket of chips, and the chips are deep fried there at the restaurant. They take tortillas and they deep fry them. Well, they also do the same thing with rice, and to make the fried rice. So the fried rice is deep fried in the same vat that they do the chips. And so I get called over and to this table, and this lady has her hand over her mouth. She looks like she's about ready to throw up.
Mhm.
And I say, is everything okay? How can I help you? And she says she pushes the basket of chips that had rice kernels in the bottom of it that were that had burned, um, and they looked like black little mouse turds.
Oh. Mhm.
and and she was like, so I tried as best I could to explain, no ma'am, that's not, that's a rice. I even picked one up and put it in my mouth. And then she almost did throw up. And there was just no way that I could convince her that it wasn't mouse turds
Yeah.
that were in the bottom. But then you give them a free meal, and you try and smile and stuff like that. But you're right, it can be very difficult, especially when when somebody personally attacks you, like that,
Yes.
when that owner personally attacked you.
Yeah. And I'm unfortunately pretty sure that if she's doing that to a customer, you better believe she's doing that to her employees. And I'm sure there was a lot of turnover in that restaurant. And it was sad. She was a really nice person and had a great product and a lot of excitement, but it was the rudeness and incivility that got in her way.
And that meant that you not only wouldn't go back there, the people that witnessed that probably wouldn't go back there. And that wasn't the only time that that happened. So the word got out in the community that this place wasn't worth going to. The food's okay, but the staff is rude.
Yes, yep, and that exactly everybody that was there then would, tell their friends, I wouldn't go there because it was an awful. And let me tell you my experience, and that chases customers away.
And that happens now in the restaurant business, that happens, but that happens in all kinds of businesses. How do you help a business owner? Or let me ask you this. When you go into a business, do
Mhm.
you assess the business first, without being noticed? Or how do you approach it so that you can be in a position to help them as best you can?
Well, it obviously depends upon what the reason is that I'm being brought in. Most often, it can be to work with the quote bad actors, the people who are the alleged problems. But a lot of times, the people that are the problems are only expressing frustration. That's their behavior is really a symptom of something else going on in the organization. And so, if you're able to help them figure out how to deal differently with that situation, or help them be able to report to the leadership, or as their coach, I can report to the leadership about some of the frustrations that they're having. Then it's the organization's decision about whether or not they want to try to change things that will prevent issues with this person, but also perhaps other people in their staff. But I also do work with people who want to uh, be better leaders and learn how to support their workers in useful ways, and also to be able to create and encourage environments that are more civil. So sometimes I've done trainings on stress management, balanced living, again, civility, to help empower people with skills, because you can say, this is a place of respect, but what does that mean, and what types of behaviors are we talking about, and how can you encourage that in your workers? So sometimes it's talks that I might give to staff members. Sometimes it's coaching with people that are in need of kind of remediation or helping improve their behavior. And sometimes it's with the leader to help them see that the way that their behavior, that what they establish and what they encourage and discourage in their workers, can really create a workplace that is supportive of creativity and productivity, or is a killer of creativity and productivity.
One of the things, and I don't know this, so help me out with this. Now we need to take our station break real quick, but when we come back, I want to ask you, first of all, I've known a lot of guys that were like in sales management,
Mhm.
that they got into management because they were a great sales guy. They had the best numbers, they had the best thoughts, and they could sell you could they could sell ice to an Eskimo, but could they lead people? And that's a whole different skill set. And when we come back, I'm going to ask, I want to ask John, how do you take a sales guy and make a manager out of him?
Okay.
Now, that is a challenge. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald, and John O'Brien is here, and with a little luck and hopefully that she'll figure it out. Rochelle got the time wrong, so she's feverishly putting her face together and all that kind of stuff. But in any event, we're talking with John O'Brien. Go to his websites, which are activatesuccess.org and also rudenessrehab.com. And he's got a book out. It's called Rudeness Rehab. It's a multiple award winner. And it is certainly worth your time to check out. And you might want to give it to your mother-in-law, to your ex-wife, and all of those people, so that they can get an idea about rudeness. Doesn't win you any prizes. But I wanted to ask you, how do you take a guy that has never been in management, but he gets promoted because he's either the boss's son or he's a great sales guy or something? How do you take a guy like that and teach him how to manage people?
Well, I would say that, any type of training or behavior change begins with motivation. And, it's like the old joke. I'm sure you've heard this one. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Just one, but the light bulb has to want to change, right? So really, with someone that's been promoted, how open are they to training, to consultation? How open are they to developing their ability as a leader? Sometimes you're exactly right. People get promoted and their training is nothing. They just get put in, okay, now you're going to manage these people. And many people in those situations get in over their head and then they're not successful because the company hasn't invested in training them or they haven't felt like they needed it. But many people I work with actually are hungry for training in terms of being a leader and how to manage people. And I always say to people that being a good leader and being a good manager begins with being your best self and have as much self-awareness as you can have. That's the important foundation for being an effective manager, is understanding yourself and how you come across to others. I think developing empathy for what are your workers going through, just like we were talking before about people treating frontline workers poorly, restaurant workers, that they've kind of gotten disconnected from what it's like to be a worker. Well, the same thing can be true. A manager may forget. I mean, I've heard this quite often. People go from being a peer with someone and how hard things are to then being a manager and kind of implementing these unrealistic deadlines or issues, expectations that they were complaining about before. So, having empathy, being clear about your expectations. I always tell people as a leader, being clear about your expectations and articulating that to a worker. So often on an assignment, the boss just is not clear with what they expect, what they want. And so being able to be clear about that with people, and set realistic deadlines. And frankly, what are the consequences going to be if people don't? But I think the other important component of it is making sure you're giving people clear feedback. Sometimes leaders are, especially if they have been a peer with someone and now they are their boss or a manager, then they struggle with that relationship change and how do they give difficult feedback to someone about the need for behavior change. So I coach people around those basic skills, but it really begins with self-awareness and empathy.
I can only imagine what it's like. Haven't been in this. Well, it was too, but what it's like when you get promoted, and there's somebody that's on the staff that thinks that job should have been theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you are the supervisor and you're supervising over them, and they have an attitude issue with that because they think that they were the ones who should have been promoted. How do you deal with that?
Well, I advise people to address that right up front. So maybe not when you first get the promotion, perhaps, but like once you're actually in the position and this person is talking, you're having your first meeting with that person, just address it directly. Like that this may seem weird, this may be uncomfortable, but I want to try to make this as comfortable and for you as I can, but also for the new manager to say to the worker who didn't get the promotion, if they feel like this is true, like I do want to try to help you grow your role in the organization and help you to be able to achieve your goals. So that's my job as your manager, is to help you shine. Helping people see that if you are now the new manager, that doesn't mean that you are going to lord that over the other person and try to make problems for them. Unfortunately, some people do in these situations, right? But your job as a manager is ideally try to help elevate your people and for them to get promoted in the organization.
Is it appropriate for you to sit down with that individual and say, hey, look, this is why I got promoted and you didn't. Let's work on those issues, that perception that's out there, so to improve your promotability, so that we can get you promoted ASAP. Not in my job, because I'm keeping mine, but somewhere in the organization or something. Is that should you approach it that directly?
The only tweak that I would give to that is I wouldn't say, here's why I got promoted and you didn't. I would say, I think you have all these skills. I might also say to the person, do you have a sense about why things didn't go well for you in this, and see what do they think. And then as their manager, if you feel like you can offer, well, these are the strengths I see that you have, but I also see that maybe these are areas of growth for you. And I'm not sure, but maybe this is why you didn't get the promotion. But let's make this a project to try to figure out what are the skills you need to develop to be able to get promoted next time.
And I want everybody to take note of something that you just said.
Yes.
And that is, rather than pointing out somebody's shortfall, you're pointing out something of growth, that this is how you can grow into a better position.
Right. Growing edges. That's what I always tell. What are your growing edges as opposed to your weaknesses?
That makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. And again, you can help a manager figure out how to be a better manager. How do you deal with the CEO? They've got that big title, and they've got that their name is on the door, and they think they're all that in a bag of chips. How do you get them to understand that the growth might be in their position that needs to happen?
Well, it obviously depends upon the CEO and how open she or he is to feedback. But I think again, sometimes people get to be CEOs and they still have development they need in their leadership capacity. Plus, the other thing is, depending upon the size of the company, they are, in fact, under a lot of stress. If it's a private company with shareholders who are going to expect profits, they're constantly, every quarter, kind of under the gun. So that is a very high pressure situation for CEOs. And so helping them to manage their stress effectively and identify what are the signals of that. And also learning to delegate. What do you have to be involved in, and what can you delegate, or what can you ask for help with? So often, sometimes, as people rise up the organization, they still want to keep their fingers in the pie of so many different things, and that's not useful, and it's just going to create more problems.
I can only imagine how stressful it would be if you had a publicly traded company and your stock started going down and you're the CEO. That's got to be tough.
Oh, it absolutely is, right? And especially when it's not necessarily anything that the business itself is doing, but it's kind of larger market forces and the market makers that are driving the stock price down. That stuff happens, and so it's hard to recover from that.
It happened yesterday, as a matter of fact.
Indeed. Yes, indeed. Right.
This thing, I don't know what it was about. This thing like tariffs or whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
And everybody got scared out of their mind in one day. And everybody said, sell, sell, sell.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with any of the businesses that were involved. But
Right.
It was just one of those things.
Yes. Well, and that's the psychology of the stock market. Right, is kind of what are the prevailing winds, and what do people think is happening, and is there irrational exuberance or intense fear that's kind of driving people one way or the other. So,
and I tell you, I've been following the stock market for a while, and there doesn't seem to be like any really concrete rhyme or reason why stuff happens. It's like this: somebody will make a statement and then it'll go viral, and then everybody's, oh, he's smart, he said it's going to fall apart. So and it could be nobody else's business, and it's nobody's fault. It just happens.
absolutely.
And so it makes it really tough. And so, by the way, you've got Rudeness Rehabbed. Is there another book in you?
Well, in fact, yes. Rudeness Rehab is part one, but when I wrote the book, there's actually a part two that is more specifically mindfulness based. So, like that Deepak Chopra stuff that I did not use myself at the restaurant, but try to use most times. That I take the skills of mindfulness as I have learned them and apply them to the situations of rudeness and how you can manage them more effectively. So
it is one of my downfalls. I consider myself pretty even keel and stuff, but one of my downfalls, if somebody comes to me or comes at me in anger, whether it's my fault or not, I tend to, rather than absorb it and then listen to it and then analyze it and then come back with an appropriate response, I tend to snap back. Is that common?
Absolutely. Right. Don't worry, Kevin. It is common, and you are like the rest of us. but naturally, we get defensive, right? I think that's just a natural human inclination. If someone's coming at us, and we're going to get defensive, and the challenge is to try to keep from snapping back, and instead of leaning back, when you can lean in. Now, of course, it's going to depend upon the situation. If it is someone in a business who is like this restaurant example I gave earlier, which this person was screaming at me, those are hard situations. I'm not saying you become uncivil, but that's very different from someone that you're living with that's made you angry, or someone in your workplace that you're going to be seeing every day and you have to interact with. There's more at risk. You have more invested in those other relationships. That doesn't mean you get to treat frontline workers poorly, but your response, you're going to be more invested in a response depending upon the closeness of the relationship.
And there are times like that in that restaurant situation that you were talking about, she was basically calling you a thief.
Yes.
And so she was, not only was she being rude, she was impugning your integrity and calling you something that was clearly not happening.
Yes, and I think, and again, if someone's also, it was also a public effort at humiliating me.
Oh
And
yeah.
if you ask John's friends and family here, John has a very long fuse, but once it goes off, duck and cover, because I don't like being falsely accused of something or someone publicly trying to publicly humiliate me. It's, that's not fair. That's not reasonable. So I wasn't screaming expletives at her, and I wasn't but I raised my voice. And sometimes that's what you have to do to be able to assert yourself back.
And and in that case, it was totally appropriate.
I think so. I mean, could I have maybe tempered my response? I was just, the other thing is these things happen sometimes. We're so shocked. Like it just comes out of nowhere. You think, what? Before she was on me before I even realized it, pointing, at me and yelling that I had stolen water.
A whole $1.50, and she lost.
Yeah.
She lost a customer forever over $1.50.
And likely a business, because I think there were a lot of $1.50s that she was getting upset about, and that ruined her business, unfortunately.
Yeah, when we come back, I want to talk to you about that, because if she was so invested in the financial end of it, and she was worried about losing the business, and then wasn't necessarily making a profit and all of that, which might have played into her thoughtlessness when she went into that. I really would love your opinion. I love talking to you, by the way. You're just awesome. I would love your opinion on how you can not go off on people because of financial issues that are happening within the business that they have nothing to do with, but it is causing you to operate your business less than you could, and maybe even driving yourself out of business. Again, we're talking with Dr. John O'Brien.
Who?
The PhD. What did you call it? Piles or what?
Piled higher and deeper. Yeah.
I just love that. There's a. I'm going to have to tell Rochelle that is a T-shirt. Piled higher and deeper. Gotcha. So we need to take a 30 seconds. 30 seconds. We'll be right back. Don't go away, anybody.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too...
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. And you're listening to us on the Brushwood Media Network and almost everywhere else on the planet. And I'm so glad that John is here. John O'Brien is here. He's an author. He's a coach. He helps people, stop losing money necessarily or doing things that are causing them to lose money in their businesses or causing turnover and low productivity, and everybody's talking behind your back and hates you, and you're sure of that, and you're like, remember Captain Quig on the which was with the strawberries?
Yes.
And everybody's out to get me. Everybody's out to get me, and I got it and stuff. There are no CEOs like that, are there?
Well, there are CEOs of all shapes and sizes, right? And again, CEOs are people, and people's personalities sometimes, especially under stress. I often talk with people about identifying what are their stress-related negative behaviors, incivility being one of them. But what are their stress-related negative behaviors? And for a leader to know what they are, because we all have them. It's not like, those poor people, they have stress and they have stress-related negative behaviors. We've all got them. So you got to know what yours are, because when you start seeing them, when you start having the urge to engage in them, that means you got to do something different.
How do you do that? In my world, you need a coach, because you need somebody outside of your physical, egotistical little brain and body that can say, have you considered this?
Yes. I think now, I mean, I've had people come into my office as, for coaching or for therapy and said, why should I bother paying you? I've got friends. And I say, well, listen, great. If you want to go talk to them, that's perfect. But it's not going to be confidential like you would have with a coach or a therapist. But also, more importantly, are they going to be completely honest with you? Are they going to be able to be completely direct with you and help you figure out what are some of your areas of growth that you need? So I think, many people want to try to believe that they can be completely objective about their subjectivity, that they're completely self-aware, but we can all benefit from learning more about ourselves and how we're coming across.
Because you might not even realize how you're actually coming across to people.
Absolutely. Right. And it's often true that people, and whether it's just on a certain day, people, didn't sleep well, so they're just not as reflective, or for some people, personality wise, they just have less awareness of how it is they're coming across to other people.
And that even when you start getting into this level, you're actually talking about relationships with all kinds of people. It could be your kids, it can be your wife, it can be your friends and neighbors. It can be that guy who has the fence that is 2 feet on the wrong side of the border, and you get mad at him because he took 2 feet of yours.
Right. Absolutely. Yep. And it was definitely intentional. And now this means war type thing versus having a conversation about it.
Yeah. And feeling, and you can, that happened in my own family, that there was a tree that was on the neighbor's side, but it had branches that were on her side, and it dripped sap onto their brand new, just painted deck, and the neighbor didn't seem to care, except when she started to cut down the branches that were on her side. Then he started to care.
Right. Yeah.
And neighbor to neighbor, that can be some of your worst conflicts, because they don't really like you and you don't really like them.
Yes. And again, it also depends upon how much have you invested in building a relationship with your neighbor. I mean, do you start by coming over and, ringing their doorbell and saying, you're dripping sap on my deck, not even hello or hi, but ideally we try to, if you build positivity in relationships, then when you have to have conflict or difficulty, you have this reservoir of positivity that can be a buffer for this other difficult conversation you have to have. But you have to have invested the positivity up front, whenever possible.
I'm thinking that, and I've been in media a long time, I'm thinking that there really ought to be a show. Maybe we could call it, like, I don't know, Positive Talk or something like that, that could lay out some of these positive aspects of how to get along with people and how to eliminate rude behavior and stuff. Don't you think that would be a pretty good show?
That would sound, they might call it Positive Talk Radio, Kevin.
Ooh, now there's an idea.
Doesn't that sound? That's a good ring to it.
It does indeed. John O'Brien has been our guest, and we're going to run out of time, dang it. And don't these hours go fast?
That went very fast. It's been such a pleasure to be your guest. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
But what I want to do is I want to give you, we've got like 3 or 4 minutes. And so I want to give you lots of space, lots of time to be able to tell our audience anything you'd like them to know about the Rudeness Rehab, the book, about your work, about anything except for politics and religion. I just need to say that.
Well, so I'm a psychologist by training. I've done mental health work for over 30 years. I teach at the University of Maine at Augusta, as I have for about 25 years. So I have developed a depth of background in psychology, not just in the practical component, but the theoretical component, that I really enjoy the opportunity to teach students. And that's served as the foundation then for applying these same skills that we've talked about today, from the theoretical to the practical of the work environment. And that's really where my passion now is, to take the message, take it to the streets. No, but take it out into businesses, outside of the more one-to-one or group work that I've done with smaller groups, out into businesses. And the book that I wrote, and we'll publish another one hopefully in the next year or so, about rudeness and incivility, is really my mission now, to get people to grow their self-awareness around the dangers of rudeness and incivility, how that creates stress in our bodies, and how it can actually lead to some, in the short term, stress-related things like headaches, stomach aches, but in the longer term, colds or more serious illnesses. People fail to realize the danger that incivility presents in our lives. And if people are curious, they can check out my website, activatesuccess.org, but also the website, rudenessrehab.com, for more information about the book, some videos, and whether or not you buy the book. My hope is that the videos and information I provide, they will be of use to many people.
And John, I got to tell you, in this day and age, with road rage the way it is, and with people carrying the number of handguns that they do, if you're going to be rude on the road, you could be risking somebody pulling over and shooting you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Unfortunately, that happens. And that happens at, I'm sure you've heard the stories at Little League games where parents become completely unglued and shoot each other or beat each other up. It's really sad,
and these are 12-year-old, 11-year-old kids, and you're giving them a fine example of what being an adult is all about.
Absolutely. Right. It's so, my hope is that we as a society can really try to grow our awareness of this pandemic and to be different. I would also just throw in there, it's not just our country. This is something that's going on in countries around the world.
Yep.
So it's not just the United States.
Indeed. I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Let's see. We've got a comment before we go. What works for me is taking the emotions out of the decision making and respond rather than react. I added the rather than react, but I think that's
absolutely, yes, because just reacting is often based on emotion. And this is what Gowdy is saying, is take emotions out of it and to try to bring in thinking and rational mind. And I would probably just maybe morph that. My suggestion would be you try to bring together the best of both, because if you're only rational and you're trying to communicate with someone, you can come across as disconnected. So you do need to have some emotion in it, but a lot of times rational mind helps us to be thinking about how to respond most effectively.
Now, John, I have to ask you, will you come back and see me again?
I'd be happy to. Absolutely. Yes.
Because I need to ask you a question that we're not going to have enough time to talk about it today, but you've been in college for you've been teaching for 25 years.
Haven't graduated yet, Kevin.
And I want to take some time for you to tell me, how have children and kids and college age kids changed in the last 25 years?
Okay.
Because I imagine there has been some of that.
Absolutely. Yes, there are changes. Some for the better, some not so much for the better.
Yeah. And then AI and all that stuff, which is, I don't have enough time. I want to, anyway, go to his websites, which are rudenessrehab.com. Get the book, buy it from him. And also the other website is activatesuccess.org. Go to and do all of that. And John, I want to thank you again for being here. I've had a great deal of fun. I am so sorry that Rochelle didn't get here, but next time she will be.
That'd be great. It's been my pleasure, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
You bet. You have an awesome day, and stay right where you are. I'll be right back. Thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another, because each other's all we've got. That's Kevin@kmmedia.pro.